All right, hi everybody. Welcome everyone to the ninth webinar in our 2025 community webinar series, which is entitled Mastering Lewy Body Dementia Together. My name is Keith Fargo, and I am the Director of Scientific Initiatives here at the Lewy Body Dementia Association. This year in our community webinar series, we've been exploring a range of topics to really help you better understand Lewy body dementia and its symptoms, but also to strengthen your ability to advocate for services and support, and to pick up new tools and techniques to live well with Lewy. Next slide, please. LBDA's mission is to optimize the quality of life for all of those affected by Lewy body dementia. And to do this, we accelerate awareness, we advance research for early diagnosis and improved care, and we provide comprehensive education and compassionate support. Next slide, please. A few technical items here that we should review before I bring in our presenter. First, if you'd like to launch the closed captioning, you can do so by selecting the button at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar that says Show Captions. And you can select that button at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar at any time during the webinar today. Also, at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar, you can find an icon that says Resources. And that Resources icon contains the links as well as other downloadable resources that accompany today's session. If you'd like, you can even print out the webinar worksheet included in the resources and guide you through how to apply today's information after the webinar. You are encouraged to submit your questions throughout the presentation, and you would do that by using the Q&A icon. The chat feature for these webinars is disabled, and so the best way to put a question into us is to use that Q&A icon. Following the presentation, we should have a few minutes left at the end, and we will address as many of those questions as we can from the Q&A pool. My colleague Glorious will be dropping links into the chat throughout today's presentation. And these links are also going to be in your email inbox in about 1 week from today as part of the post-webinar thank you email. This presentation is being recorded today, and an email will be sent to those who registered with the link to view the recording also in about 1 week. And that includes you. If you're here today, you'll still get the link to view the recording. And when you leave the session today, there will be a brief survey that appears that asks for your feedback about today's presentation. And we really would appreciate it if you would take a moment to complete that survey. It truly does help inform our content, not just for the remainder of this year, but also for what next year's community webinar series should look like. Next slide, please. Finally, you can keep learning between webinars, and so I would encourage all of you to consider some of our on-demand learning options. For one thing, recordings of all of the past webinars can be found on our YouTube channel, which is called LBDA TV. We also have a Lewy Learning Center, which offers courses on a variety of topics that you can watch, rewatch, and share with friends and family. Slide 6, please. You can also watch the film Spark about Robin Williams' battle with Lewy body dementia and other video offerings on our Mediflix channel. Next slide, please. And of course, please join our social media channels to hear about upcoming LBDA programs and webinars. Slide 8, please. And finally, please always visit our main website at lbda.org for all of your other LBDA needs. All right, so now if we can go ahead and end the slides, let's learn a little bit about who's joining us in the audience today and what your experience with Lewy body dementia is. Glorious is going to launch a polling question now. Thank you very much, and you can answer that on your screen. Great. You can see here if you're a person with lived experience, we're asking you how long has Lewy been part of your life? And if you're a person who works in Lewy body dementia, we're asking you essentially how long have you been working with Lewy body dementia? Terrific. All right. Thank you all for responding. We're getting a lot of great responses here. From what I'm seeing, about 2/3 of the audience today, their experience level is 0 to 3 years. So these are kind of new topics for many of you. There is about a third of the audience here who's had more experience, 4 to 8 years. And I'd say about 5%, it looks like, who have more experience than that, 9 years or beyond. Thank you for that. Now, the next question. Oh, let's see, I didn't share the results. Hopefully you all saw the results there. I just read them out, but again, basically 2/3 with relatively little experience, and then essentially 1/3 with more experience. So the next question here is going to be about, thank you, how knowledgeable you are on today's webinar topic. So there are some questions or some various answers that you can endorse here. Either the webinar topic is completely new to you. Looks like there are a few people saying that, but most people here are saying, and I'll share the results here in just a moment. Looks like we're still getting some great answers come in, some good answers. Okay, I'm going to end the poll here and share the results. Looks like about a fifth of you said the webinar topic is new to you. You've probably heard of clinical trials, but maybe you're a little bit confused about what the phases mean, et cetera, or you know something about the phases but would like to learn more. A lot of folks said, I know a little bit about this webinar topic. That was over half of you, 57%. And about another fifth said, I'm very knowledgeable about today's webinar topic, which is great to hear. So hopefully for you folks, this will be a little bit of a refresher, but do bear with us because we have to keep the other, looks like 75-ish% in mind here. So there will be some, if you are very knowledgeable about today's topic, there probably will be some repetition here for you, but I think that is okay. And then let's go ahead and launch the final poll if we can. You know what? I actually may have gone beyond the polls. Okay, well, thank you. I apologize for my little snafu there. So actually what we're going to do now is we're going to meet our presenter, Dr. Federico Rodriguez-Porcel. We'll welcome him in, and he is an assistant professor of neurology in the movement disorders and behavioral neurology divisions at the Medical University of South Carolina. Some of you may refer to that as MUSC. Dr. Rodriguez-Porcel obtained his medical degree from Universidad del Salvador in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and he completed his internship and a neurology residency at Loyola University Medical Center, which is just outside Chicago. He served, as a matter of fact, he served as chief resident there in his last year. Subsequently, Dr. Rodriguez-Porcel completed advanced specialty training at the University of Cincinnati. So please use your reactions tab today to give a warm welcome to Dr. Federico Rodriguez-Porcel.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. I'm going to be sharing my screen. Let's see. I hope that everyone can see it. And now I'm going to make it continue to share. Okay. Hope that everyone can see it. Otherwise, let me know. So again, thank you, Keith, for the introduction and everyone for joining today. I think this is a very important topic that comes up often, both in the clinic and in research. And the way I see it is that I'm sure that all of you have a profession or a hobby or an interest where some things, you communicate with other people, and you share certain things that you assume that everyone knows, or a certain vocabulary. So for example, I don't know, if someone is an accountant, that about taxes, and certain things that you can do with taxes, and certain forms that have numbers. I have know nothing about taxes. So if someone comes in like me that knows nothing, you have to explain certain things. But if you're communicating among people that know the topic, someone who doesn't know the topic may be a little bit lost. So I think it's a little bit of that. My goal today is to present some of that information, some of those tenets relating to clinical trials that those of us who are involved in them know and share, and some of that vocabulary as well. So this title kind of precedes me. So I'm not going to unlock any secrets. There's no secret organization that controls the clinical trials. So it's just trying to bridge two worlds that maybe sometimes are a little bit different. So let's get started. Let me see. So the outline for today is I'm going to talk about 4 topics that, again, I think talking to patients and families come up pretty often. Was first, why do we need medical trials, clinical trials? Then the process of a treatment or a drug going from the lab to the pharmacy, what does that look like? And then 2 topics that I think are often appear is when a treatment makes the news, or someone tells you about something that could be helpful for you or for your loved one. And the last part is being part of the process. Without volunteers, without people that participate in clinical trials, there's no scientific advance. So that is also important, but the process can be kind of daunting. So the idea is to give you a little more information about that process. So first is, why do we need medical clinical trials? So just to give you an example, obviously this is made up. You are someone who has a loved one who has Lewy body dementia, and one morning you wake up, you're reading the newspaper, either physically or in a tablet or cell phone, and you read a news title that says that not drinking milk increases the risk of dementia. And you say, okay, I know someone who has Lewy body dementia, and this hits home, so I want to know more about it. And you read the study says that there's a study done in 3 million people, let's say in Argentina, that found that those who don't drink whole milk daily are 10% more likely to have dementia. So as you don't want to have dementia, or you feel that this could impact the person that you get into a car and go to whatever grocery store you want to go to get milk, right? So as you're walking down the aisle, you see a friend of yours, someone that you had seen before a couple of months ago, and they were not doing well, and now they look much better. They look great, and she's more active, more alert, and she seems in a good mood. And she sees you with holding the gallon of milk, and you ask her, like, what did you do? What's different? Why are you so much better? And she tells you, well, I stopped drinking whole milk. So then all of a sudden you're stunned, because you say, what should I do? What's the thing that I should do? Because I'm getting conflicting information here from 2 different sources. That's something that often happens. We get information that things that we should be doing or we should avoid, and sometimes it's the same thing, and it's difficult to know how does it apply to us. So the big question here is it milk the cause here? We want to understand cause and effect. Is it the milk the cause? Is it the milk the one that's driving the changes in this population in Argentina or in your friend? And then you start thinking a little more about it. What should I do? And you think, well, my friend looked so good. I mean, I saw her. I know that she's not lying, and I can see the difference. But you start wondering if it could be something else that drove the change. Could it be that she was lactose intolerant and never knew about it, and now she stopped drinking milk? You're not lactose intolerant, so that wouldn't apply to you. Maybe she's at the same time she started or stopped a medication that helped her or was affecting her. Maybe she started exercising at the same time, or maybe she had the flu and now she recovered. So there could be other factors that happen at the same time as she stopped drinking milk. And also you look at the news from Argentina and you say, well, maybe the people that were this 3 million people were people that were malnourished. So if they didn't drink milk, things were worse. I'm not malnourished, so it doesn't apply to me. Or maybe instead of whole milk, they will drink an alternative that was toxic. Or maybe, so that also is important to know. At the same time, you want to know, yes, it increased the risk by 10%, but what is the risk? Is that a lot? Is that little? Is that a lot? So you don't know that. And also, what type of dementia? So you want to get a little more clarification on that. Okay, so as you can say, just tying it to one cause and one effect is not that easy. And that's what science tries to do. Science is a method we try to understand if we change one thing and we see a difference, is that change really driving? Is that cause really driving that change? And life is complex, and there's a lot of things that can happen at the same time. So what trials really try to do is to make sure that we introduce only one change, and all of the rest where it's accounted for. We look at we have to look at a big amount of people and see if we only introduce one change and all the rest is kind of the same, of cancels itself out if there's a difference. So that's why we need clinical trials, because in one person that change can be tied to other things that are going on. And that's when we think about clinical trials and we go over what a randomized controlled trial is the highest level of evidence. Why? Because the thing what we're doing here is we're taking into account all the other factors that could be contributing to a change, and we are only comparing that thing that we're interested in this case, a treatment. So that's why it's the highest level of evidence. Okay. And then actually the highest one is when we pool a lot of clinical trials, right? So what does the process look like? How does something go from the lab to the pharmacy? And we'll go over the different stages. It starts what we call a preclinical phase in the lab, and then it goes through three phases, and then to meet what we call regulatory approval, and then it goes through surveillance. So let's dive into these different phases. The first one is phase 0, where you look at a drug or an agent, and you look at it either in cells or in animals. And what you want to see is the drug, what does the drug do, right? So in this case, if you're interested in a drug that takes away Lewy bodies from the brain, you look at what's called the pharmacodynamics, which is what is the action of the drug? What does the drug do to the body? In this case, if I'm looking for something that, again, removes Lewy bodies, does it do that? If I'm looking for a drug that increases dopamine in the brain, does it increase dopamine? And then the second part you look at is pharmacokinetics. This really means what does the body do to the drug? So how does it absorb it? How does it distribute it? Does it go, if it's a drug that I'm interested, it goes to the brain, does it go to the brain, or just does it stay, let's say, in the liver? Does the body change that drug, or how does it get rid of the drug? So those things that are important, because you may have an excellent a drug that does its job, but if you take it, it doesn't go to where it's supposed to go, it's going to be no use. And also, very important, what are the toxic effects? If it kills the cell, obviously, that's not something that we should be moving forward with. And again, this is focused more on in cells or in animals. This is not always necessary. Not every drug goes through this process. Sometimes we start testing for drugs because we found maybe some drugs were already approved for something else, and we noticed that they can be helpful for a different, what we call a different indication. So that can happen. A good example of that is in Parkinson's disease. There was several studies showing that people that had gout usually progressed a little bit slower than people that didn't have gout. So there was this whole series of studies trying to reproduce that. So it didn't necessarily have to go through what we call a more clinical phase. But independently if a drug goes through a preclinical phase or not, they usually have to go through a phase 1. And this is a phase where the drug is tried in people that don't have the indication. So usually think about healthy volunteers, and it's a small group, because what we're looking for is to see, we already tested this in animals, and we have an idea of what the drug can do at a cellular level, but we want to know how this works in humans, right? And again, this is where we look at, where does the drug go? If I take a pill, is it absorbed? If it's absorbed, does it go to where it's supposed to go? Does it go to the brain in this case? Because that's what we're talking about. And also we want to know what dose or what ranges of doses human beings can tolerate, and what side effects may arise from those doses. That gives you an idea. And depending on the drug, again, giving an example of removing Lewy bodies may not be a good one in this case, because in healthy volunteers you don't expect to see Lewy bodies. But let's say you're testing a drug that helps you with attention, and you can get an idea if it has some effectiveness or not. And usually the success rate of this of phase 1 is 75% in general for clinical trials. Usually for Those are in the field of neurodegeneration is a little bit lower, but that gives you an idea that out of 100 compounds that you start with, 75 make it through a phase 1. Then you go to a phase 2, where you, in this case, you already test it on people and human beings that don't have the indication, but now you want to test it in people that have the condition you're trying to address. And here you look for dosing, because what a healthy volunteer may be able to tolerate may be different than what someone with a disease can tolerate. And here you may get some evidence of benefit. Again, this is a smaller group, and as you can tell from our previous discussion, if you have 10 people and you got 5 that responded well and 5 that didn't respond well, you may say, well, I need more evidence. So the idea is that you get a certain amount of people that gives you a good idea for the dosing, but you may need a little, and can give you some idea of whether the drug can be helpful or not, but it might not be enough. And as I didn't mention this before, but as you can imagine, all these clinical trials cost a lot of money and time, and this is driven a lot by by industry. So they want to know if it's worth investing in a compound for a subsequent phase. So it gives you an idea if they should program a larger trial. Phase 2 trials vary a lot on design. You may read like phase 2A, phase 2B. They vary a lot, but in general, the idea is that you get an idea of the dosing and maybe some evidence of benefit. But even here, you see that the success rate is about 50%. So we started with 100, we went down to 75. Out of the 75, we got 50%. So let's say 38, just to break it in. Okay. Then we move to the phase 3, which is probably the one we all look for. So if you read about a trial and they're mentioning there's something that is successful or promising, and it tells you it's a phase 3, then I think it's okay to be a little more encouraged about the results. And here you do it again in subjects with the indication. So in this case, it's a larger number, because here you're not looking so much for dosing or for safety, but you're looking for efficacy. So you want to know if this drug works. And meaning it works, it means that is it better than what we already have? So in most of the, for LBD, we don't have a treatment, so it's compared to not being treated. But if there is a treatment, you compare to usually what's called best medical management. But you also look for safety, obviously, if there are no side effects, and tolerability. So for example, if I have a drug that works great, but you have to you have to get a spinal tap every day, it might not be that tolerable. And here we get about 50% success. So we went from 38 to 19. And again, this is in general for clinical trials, and the numbers in neurodegeneration are much lower. And what's important is that this information is used for approval, depending on the agency. We'll talk about that. Sometimes they need 2 positive phase 3 trials. The next step is we go through what's called regulatory approval, and it depends on where you're at, where you live. In the case of the United States, is the FDA, and where the companies usually that own the patent for the drug need approval to sell the drug, and all the trial information is submitted. The timeline usually takes a year or even more, because there's a lot of back and forth. It's not only the FDA not only has to decide whether the medication is safe and is helpful to treat the symptom, or to treat the condition, but also what patients might be eligible and what things you have to monitor or control. So there's a big involved process. I'm sure that a lot of you that heard about all the news regarding the approval of the first Alzheimer's medication a couple of years ago. There was a lot of back and forth, so it's a very involved process. And something that I think it's important for me to tell you is that the FDA treats drugs and devices differently. So for drugs, you have to show you have safety, but also that it's effective. So they're not going to approve a drug that it's not effective, that shows no benefit. Now, for devices, it's different. What they look for is that that device is safe. So if someone is trying to tell you, well, this is an FDA approved device, it means that it's safe. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be helpful. It's not the same thing for a drug. So I think it's important to take that into consideration, because as you can imagine, the standard for approval is a little bit lower for devices. And after that approval, some there might be what's called a phase 4, and it's more with real world data. So when the drug is in the market and it can be prescribed, and people with the right indications can start using it, you can start measuring other things, such as like the efficacy and the safety over a longer period of time. Usually the phase 3 trials can only last a couple of years, maybe 1 or 2 years, so sometimes up to 3, but that's a rarity. But here you can monitor it over a longer period of time. And you can compare it to other therapeutic options, or even whether if it improves quality of life. So it's more what we call real world data. Sometimes companies decide not to do it. Sometimes the FDA actually requires that they may approve it, but that approval may be contingent on the fact that they need to do a phase 4 study. So now that we went over briefly the phases, something that happens very often, and I'm sure all of you have experienced, is when either we read in the news or someone tells us about something that we should be doing different, like a new trial, or like a new medication or a new activity. And we get confused, right? We don't know should we do it or not, and we can see all variety of things, right? In this case, a leukemia drug like nitazoxanide that has gone there has been significant trials and is still being studied as a potential treatment for Lewy body, to other things like maple syrup that sometimes there have been claims on whether they can help or not dementia. And I think it's important to, and also we get maybe these type of information from friends or family that obviously want the best for us, but and they want to provide us with information. And I think it's important to think about, particularly when we're getting this through the news, is that sometimes the job of the people in the news business is to make sure that they capture our attention. So they have as in the news we see, sometimes they do a good job of not lying without necessarily telling the whole truth. So they may capture your attention and may leave relevant information from it. So that's I think important to take into consideration. And you're going to see in the lower quadrant like all spices, different type of spices that have been claimed to have some benefit in dementia. That there are different things that make the news in terms of what can be the next cure for dementia, Lewy body, Alzheimer's, or Parkinson's disease. So things that you have to consider, and I think the way to look at this is, first, when you read that title, you want to know who was evaluated. And it's not uncommon that's left out of the title. Sometimes you may assume that it's self-implied that it's in humans, but sometimes it's not. And I think this is a good example of it, where you see the title from this newspaper, that research on reversing Alzheimer's disease reveals lithium as a potential key, but on another journal, a journal, the more scientific one, put that in title that it's in mice. So that tells you that it's just in very early stages, and that's important not only to maybe get a better idea of how enthusiastic you should be about a cure, but also whether it's something that you should be considering for yourself. It's not uncommon that I get questions like this. Actually, I got this question multiple times on whether I should be started on lithium because they read this study, or they read about this study, or another study. And it might be beneficial for animals, but you don't know if it's safe for humans. And then other things that you have to consider is it for in humans, but maybe that they don't have the condition that you have, or even if they have the condition, is what severity. It's not the same to have to take a drug if that is used that has shown benefit in people that are very advanced, and you are at various stages, that the other way around. So I think those things are important to consider. So again, if you have to take anything from this talk, would be when you read a title and that you think, oh, this is maybe the next cure. You want to look at who were evaluated. Is it in mice, in rats, in animals, or was it in humans with the disease that you're interested in? So that will save you a lot of time. Then the next thing you want to know is what was evaluated. Because again, the title may say a cure or a treatment for Lewy body dementia, but they're different. That can mean different things. It could be targeting a symptom. So, for example, it could be tremor in Lewy body, or it can be memory and thinking, or it can be hallucination. So, medication can target different things without necessarily that may or may not apply to you. So, for example, if I tell you this drug is great and it treats tremor, but you don't have any tremor, so yes, it treats Lewy body, but it doesn't apply to you. Then the other thing you have to consider is it more of a milestone? So as conditions progress, does it delay, I don't know, death or needing admission to a nursing home? And finally, if it affects disease progression. So I think that the big thing sometimes that is easily confused is not all treatments work the same way. Some of them focus on the symptom, and other ones focus more on the disease itself. It's the way I like to explain it in clinic is as if you have a torn ligament and you have pain, and I give you pain medications. I'm treating the symptoms, but not treating the cause. On the other hand, other things like treatments for cancer, where you need to where you treat the cause, and maybe the symptoms, it may not affect the symptoms that much. And then the other thing that you need to know regarding the outcome is whether, and an example of what I just said is this one, right? This news, diabetes drug may slow down progression of Parkinson's disease. But if you look at it, it's the motor symptoms, which is great. And I think it's very promising. But if you're interested in memory and thinking, it might not necessarily apply to you. And the other thing that you have to take into consideration is whether that difference is meaningful or not. I put this example that I found. So, for example, if you're in the lower right quadrant and someone offers you a good treatment to grow your hair, and you end up in the upper left quadrant, that's great. It definitely works, and it's something, and it's what you're looking for. But if you only move one side to the left, where yes, it worked, you have a little more hair, but you necessarily doesn't create a meaningful difference, then it might not be worth it. And that's also important to take into consideration. That may be sometimes difficult to navigate because we all use like scales that sometimes are complex, and even us sometimes don't understand whether it's meaningful or not. So it's something that important to discuss with your physician or with someone who knows more about what the scale looks at. And then the other part that is relevant is how was it evaluated? You may say, well, this applies to me. It looks meaningful, but how was the trial designed, and how was it done? And the first thing is you want to know what phase. As we said before, you can see if it was a phase 1, it was in healthy volunteers, it's small group. So knowing if it's really helpful or not, it might be too premature to know that. Now, if it's a phase 3, and then that gives you a different type of expectation on what the drug may or may not be able to do. The other thing you want to think is how many people were involved. As I said before, if you're thinking about the effects on milk and you only try this in 2 people, it might not be enough. Now you try it in 2,000, and you see a difference, that might give you a little better idea. And also, it's important to consider, is it prospective or retrospective? Prospective means that you design the trial and you start measuring. You say, well, we're going to look at this, and from now on, we're going to start monitoring people forward. Retrospective is that we have this idea, and we're going to look back in people like a database and see if there was a difference or not. And that's different because when you're collecting data forward, is usually you get more of the same data, and it's cleaner, and it's more rigorous scientifically. If you have to look back, it's not uncommon that there's data that you're no longer able to collect, or people may have passed. So it's a little bit messier to do research. And this is probably this is definitely an important slide. You want to know if it was controlled or not. The reason being is, as I said before, what we try to do with research with clinical trials is to see if changing one factor makes a difference, and what we want to do is we want to make sure that all the rest is the same or evens itself out. That the only thing that makes this group that makes a group different is that we introduce this difference. So what I'm saying is if I have a clinical trial and I can recruit 100 people, and you tell me, I want to make sure that I get the drug. I don't want to be part of the control group and say, okay, let's give it to everyone, and if they get better, they get better, and if they get worse, they get worse. The problem is that just by participating in a trial and knowing that you're doing something about it, you may feel better already. There might be also what we call practice effect. You get used to the tests that you're being delivered, that are evaluating you. So then it's hard to tell if everyone that participated in the trial got a drug, if there's really a difference or not. That's why rigorous trials have to be controlled. They have to have what's called a control group, a group that does not receive the experimental drug, what you're trying to do. If there's already a treatment for it, and that is part of medical management, you should continue that. But if there's nothing, then usually they receive nothing. Okay. And the other part is blinding. So if I tell you, you know what, one group is going to receive the drug, the other one is going to receive what's called a placebo. Is going to receive a placebo, but you're going to know if you're one group or the other. You're going to feel better. There's going to be bias. You're going to know, oh, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling much better because you want the medication to work. And there's bias in all of us. And even not only from a participant perspective, but even from an evaluator perspective. If I know you're getting the drug, I'm going to be biased one way or the other. For better, for worse, I'm going to be biased. So rigorous trials, studies, usually what's called a double blind. So the patient, the participant, doesn't know what they're receiving, and the evaluator does not know what they're getting. And that's only disclosed like months after the trial is gone. The effect of placebo, and I should put a separate slide for this, is very strong and potent. There's a study that was done now more than a decade ago in people with Parkinson's disease, where they gave them the same medication, and to a group of people they told it was a cheap medication, and to another group it was an expensive medication. And you can imagine who did better: the people that thought they were getting a very expensive medication. Okay. Finally, as I said before, without participants, there's no evidence. We can talk a little bit, we can talk all that we want, we can have all these ideas of how Lewy body can be cured or treated, whether you should drink milk or not drink milk, and you can come up with all the hypotheses that you want. But in the end, we need to test those hypotheses, and without people that participate in the study, and their care partners, we're not going to be able to form any evidence. So that's maybe one of the reasons why you want to participate in a trial, because you're contributing to science, and not only the maybe your life, but the lives of people in the future that have the condition. Whether you like it or not, to some extent, if you have a loved one, or you yourself have Lewy body dementia, and you go to see a doctor and they're trying one thing or the other, or they're trying different medications, it's because someone in the past volunteered for a clinical trial. So that's important for you to know. You can decide, obviously it's a personal decision, but I think it's important to know that you can be part of the process that way. Also, you learn more about the condition when you participate in a clinical trial. Obviously, you have closer contact with investigators, and you may get to know more about it. There are some studies that show that people that participate in a clinical trial may do better than people that don't, in the sense that you have closer monitoring, and that is always a good thing. So it's something else to consider. You may want to participate because other treatments have not helped, or there is no treatment. That's also a good idea. But one thing that maybe again, I should have done a separate slide directly for this is that your health is always more important than what the research results. And the reason I say this is because it's not uncommon that people say, "Oh, I'm going to be a guinea pig, and if I sign, I'm giving away all my rights." No, your right, your health is always more important. And I tell you by experience that the people that do the trials, the last thing they want to do is to have a drug that is not safe, because that would be a big problem for them. And as physicians, the most important thing is your healthcare. So I don't want you to, if you're thinking about participating in a clinical trial, it's not that you're resigning your rights or your health is going to go downhill. Okay. So let's say you, after listening to this talk, you say, well, you know what? I think I'll be interested in participating in a trial. I think it would be a good idea. And you want to know what are the next steps? What are what steps you follow? So I think Keith is going to talk a little bit about more the tracker where you can find clinical trials. You may want to ask your physician that if there are any trials at your institution or close by. And then you can approach the research staff. And what the first step is that they should be able to explain the clinical trial. What are they studying? What compound? What does it do? What is supposed to help you with? What is the outcome? You want to know, is it going to help you with tremor? Is it going to slow down the disease? And that gives you a good idea. What is the schedule? Do I need to come every day? Do I need to come every 6 months? How does that work? Very important, what are the risks? If you want to know what are the things that could have happened before, and they can explain all the process. If after hearing that you decide that you want to move forward, you will have to sign what's called informed consent. Well, they have to go formally through all of this anyway, and they have to make sure that you understand it. Sometimes they ask you to repeat it, what they said, and if you completely understand, to make sure you understood what you're signing, and then you look at eligibility. All trials, as I said before, the thing that they want to make sure that they're looking at a group of people that is as much alike as possible, and at the same time, you're only changing one thing. In this case, the drug that you're looking for. So there's usually a lot of different criteria. Not only having the condition, but also the severity, make sure that you're not taking any medications that could affect the drug that you're trying. And sometimes you know that even before you're going through the informed consent. So if I see someone in clinic and there's a trial for Lewy body dementia, but they have a stroke, and I know that this trial doesn't accept people with strokes, I'm not going to refer them to a trial. But there are other things that I'm not going to know until they're in the trial. So that varies, and that's where you have the eligibility. If you want to go forward with the trial and you're deemed eligible, then you have a baseline where they do a lot of tests depending on the trial, and then you have the subsequent visits until the end of the trial. Okay. Sometimes when the trial ends, there's what's called an open label phase, where, as I said before, trials usually you have what's called a therapeutic arm, where you receive the drug that they're testing, and then a control arm or placebo arm where you don't get a drug. In the open label study, everyone gets the drug. So this is after the study has ended. It depends on the trial if they decide to do it or not. So I explained to you the process, but I think it's important to know like what questions to ask. And the first thing I would do is, if you get anything from this slide, is you can ask the person, like, what should I be asking? What should I know that you haven't told me already? And I think that's a good start. The first thing you want to know is the goal of the study. Like, what are they aiming for? So let's say they are there's a study, you have Lewy body dementia, and you don't have tremor, and they're looking for a drug that improves tremor, and you're not interested in it. You say, like, I don't have tremor. I'm not interested in participating in this. But and there's another study that looks at slowing down the progression of the disease. Then you might be interested in participating in that one. You also want to know the duration, right? If it lasts 5 years and you have to come every week and you live 3 hours away, that might not be something that you want to do. Again, this can vary and change, but it's important for you to know what you're signing up for to some extent. Again, I want to introduce the caveat again. You can drop off at any time. Don't even to drop off giving a reason. You can say like, I don't want to do the study anymore because it's too much for me, and that's completely fine. So obviously, if this the other reason why you may need to drop off from the trial is if there's a side effect. But we'll talk a little bit about that. You also want to ask about the schedule and the procedure. So what are things that need to be done as part of the study? If, I don't know, if you're claustrophobic and you need to have multiple MRIs, that's something that you may want to know, or if you need to get lumbar punctures repeatedly, and that's something that you don't want to do, that's also something that you want to ask about. Really important to know about the risk and the possible side effects. If you are participating in a phase 3 trial, there's probably evidence of what happened in phase 1s and phase 2s, and you want to know a little bit what they noticed in those previous trials and what are the other risks, and also how that does affect your medical care. As I said before, your health is the most important thing, but sometimes being part of a clinical trial, if you want to make changes in medications, that might affect your eligibility for the study, or they may ask you to come for an additional visit just to monitor it. Other thing that's important that I can tell you that are very picky with is privacy. So obviously, you put in your name and they're following you, and there's information you want to make sure that you ask how the people in the trial are monitoring your privacy. And in some trials, there's going to be some reimbursement, and they can help you with transportation. I would say if you are ever offered a trial in which they ask you to pay, I would run away from that trial. Usually they're going to pay, or they're going to do it for free. So no one should charge you for participating in a clinical trial. Okay, just want to make sure that I say that. And also, the other thing that you want to know is what happens when the study ends. Is there an open label phase, or meaning that during the duration of the trial, you may not know if you're getting the drug or not, but a lot of trials, after they finish that part, they do what's called an open label study where they give you the medication, and they usually give it for free until whether it's approved or not. So you want to know if that is a possibility. So again, there's a lot of other questions that you may have, but I think those are important items that sometimes forget to ask, or we don't know we should be asking about. Okay, so on behalf of the MUSC, I want to thank you all for listening to me, and I hope that this was helpful, and I'm happy to take questions. Okay. Let me see. Keith.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Federico. Great presentation. Very engaging. Lots of information there. So attendees, please take a moment to use your reactions on your Zoom toolbars. Go ahead and show Federico some appreciation for the presentation today. One of the things that you heard was there are different ways to find clinical trials, and lots of clinical trials out there. So I'm actually going to just share my screen for one moment, and I have a slide as well. If you'll bear with me. Okay. One of the ways that we like to, let's see, first of all, are people seeing this screen? I'm going to ask Federico to shake or nod his head. Awesome. Thank you, Federico. Appreciate that. So Lewy Trial Tracker is the Lewy Body Dementia Association's tool for helping people find clinical trials, in particular if you don't want to keep coming back to our website. If you go to our website, lbda.org, you will find a listing of current clinical trials that are seeking participants today. But of course, there are upcoming trials and upcoming studies that we usually know about as well. And what we can do if you use the Lewy Trial Tracker is we can actually reach out to you proactively and let you know about those studies when they launch. So that way you don't have to keep coming back and checking the website. The way that works, just briefly, is we do ask you to fill out a questionnaire. I think there are about 15 questions on it. They tell us a little bit about you. How old are you? Where do you live? Do you have Lewy body, or are you a care partner for someone with Lewy body, etc.? And then we use that information to let you know about studies that are launching that match your characteristics and your preferences. Now, I want to say very clearly here, we never share that information about you with the study teams. So this is not about us sending your information to researchers. It's about you telling us what kinds of studies you would like to hear about and what kinds of studies would be appropriate for you. And then we use that information to decide what information to send to you. And then if you're interested in any of those studies, then we would ask you to reach out to that study team and let them know and find out more information. So I'll stop sharing my screen with that, and let's go ahead and there we go. Okay, so we're both spotlighted. Excellent. We did get a number of really good questions here, Federico. So let me go ahead and bring up the question list. It kind of disappeared on me when I came back into the to the chat here. So bear with me for 1 second. Okay, excellent. So I think the first thing, you mentioned at the end something about open label extensions, and that's when, when you're in this study, you may or may not get the drug, but then in some cases, but not always, after that part of the study is over, the part that has a placebo and an active group, sometimes everyone is offered the opportunity to then take the active drug. How common is that in your experience?
That's a very good question. I think it's pretty common, particularly with larger trials that are for what we call disease modifying therapies.
Yep.
I think it's pretty common because that also helps uh, the companies understand the difference. Sometimes when you're participating in the trial and you don't know if you're getting the drug or not, that can introduce its own set of bias. And I also think it's particularly if we're talking about a medication that has the potential of being helpful, you don't want to interrupt the course of that medication. So it's not uncommon that I think that more common than not, particularly for what we call disease modifying therapies, to see that happening. But there's always it's not something that's mandated or set in stone. But you want
Yeah, and you
you want
mentioned
to ask about that.
yeah, like you said, you asked the study team ahead of time to see if that's going to be part of it. That's important. Here's a question. We talked also about eligibility criteria, inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria. This person is asking if an LBD patient has cancer, would that automatically keep them out of LBD trials?
Um, Depends on the trial. No, it depends on the trial. I would say let's put it this way. I think yeah, definitely depends on the trial. One thing that I think it's important to think about is, and this applies not only for trials, but applies also for when you go to the clinic and you talk about a medication. It's something that I mentioned before. If the treatment is something that's going to treat your symptoms, or is it something that's going to treat your condition? So I'll give you an example. If there's a trial for tremor and you have cancer, that might not affect your eligibility. It might not be now for a disease modifying therapy, something that we want to know if it slows down the progression of the disease, introducing another factor that could be affecting the severity of health, that might make it more challenging. Now, every trial is different. I wouldn't say I think automatically is too strong. I don't think it never hurts to ask. No one will be mad at you or should never be mad at you or dismissive because you ask a perfectly reasonable question because it varies, really.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, thank you. So it sounds like the answer there is it's not definite one way or the
no.
other. And ask, that's the thing to do always is ask. And the study team should be able to tell you. Great. Awesome. So one person mentioned that a lot of the studies, that they hear about are really meant for people who are far enough along that they need to have a care partner. Maybe there's somebody living in the home with them. Are there studies out there for people who are maybe earlier in the disease process and maybe don't even have a care partner yet or need a care partner?
Yeah, I think, yeah, definitely. Definitely I would say that the field is moving more towards like looking at earlier stages than like early stages in the disease. Uh, it depends on the trial itself, but now, and I didn't mention this, but thinking about trials that maybe go into the phases before you have dementia. I think of people that may have dream enactment behaviors. Uh, not all of those required for you to have someone come with you. And I would say even then, when it requires for someone to come with you, it doesn't necessarily always need to be someone that lives with you. It could be a friend or someone that just can give the investigator team an additional perspective. The reason being is if I see you for 20 minutes or an hour every 6 months and you tell me everything is fine, might not be a good glimpse of what's really going on. Um, but I guess in the end, it's the same as this same answer as for the other question you have to ask. I, I think that it's I'm not I wouldn't be surprised if you don't need to have a care partner come with you for the trial. And
Yeah, these are great questions, and it sounds like the answer to a lot of these questions really is you ask the study team because it varies. It really
yeah,
does vary. Yep.
it varies.
I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna end with one final question for you, which is: are there any studies going on at Medical University of South Carolina right now that you would like people who are online to know about? Or if not, is there a place that they can look where there might be later?
Yeah, so I think obviously as at MUSC we're trying to develop to have more trials. We don't have any for specifically for LBD at this point, but we have for earlier stages of Parkinson's disease. So definitely check. There are other research that we're developing more, but that has to do with brain stimulation. So not at this point, but please feel free to contact me and stay tuned. And we hope to have more to offer.
Okay, awesome, fantastic. Thank you very much, Federico. All right. So I hope everybody enjoyed today's presentation. Unfortunately, we are out of time. On behalf of LBDA, I would like to thank all of you for taking time out of your day and thank Dr. Rodriguez-Porcel for sharing his insights with us as well. You will receive an email in about 1 week with the link for the recording for the presentation, as well as the resources and links that were shared during today's webinar. We do invite you to visit our landing page on our website to stay informed about upcoming webinars and to access past recordings. And Glorious is going to drop a link to that in the chat right now. I'm going to go ahead and invite you all to consider joining us for our next webinar, which is called Home Sweet Home, Tailoring Spaces for Every Phase of Lewy Body Dementia. And that webinar will occur on Wednesday, October 15th, starting at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. In that webinar, we'll be joined by occupational therapist Don Heiderscheidt, who will discuss how creating a safe and comfortable living environment is crucial for individuals living with LBD, and how even minor home modifications can make a significant difference in their and your quality of life. In this informative session, you'll gain insights into how changes in your living space can make a real impact on your quality of life. You can preview some of Dawn's work by viewing her free lesson on the Lewy Learning Center, which is called Adapting Your Environment for Safety and Success with LBD. Glorious is going to drop a link for that course in the chat as well, and that will also be included in the email that you receive in about 1 week. You can register for that October webinar now if you would like, and we'll drop a link to that in the chat as well. And the final comment, please do take a moment when the webinar ends today to fill out that survey. We truly do use that to inform our content. And we look forward to seeing you in October. Thanks, everyone. Take care, all.